Hey, folks, welcome. It's the Coach, the Commentator with Jon Crispin. I'm ESPN college basketball analyst Jon Crispin. He is Brother Joe, head coach of the, I don't know, are you tops in the region? You technically tops in the region?
I don't even know how they figure that out, and I'm a one game at a time, and
Oh,
hopefully
here we
one
go. The
weekend at a time.
cliches. There you go. That is the coach right there.
I do.
Next man up mentality, one game at
That's
a time. That's the head coach, Rowan University men's basketball. I got to finish my intros. Rowan University men's basketball recently named to the NCAA tournament Division III, hosting the first couple of rounds. You won your NJAC championship, which is good. Last time we did this, we showed how you went viral, but not for the right reasons.
for the worst game of the season.
Yeah, things are better now. And I realize I
Show
do this
some
like,
highlights of better games. How about that?
yeah, we
Huh?
could do that. I don't have any. I realize I do like a formal intro, yet 2 seconds before I hit record on this thing, what is it? What is it that you asked me?
I don't even remember.
You said, "What are we going to talk about?" So it's like I think it's kind of important to say because
We have a lot
like
of
we have
ideas, which is dangerous.
yes, but it's like one of those things where I think people always say like, "Oh, I like the conversations." I don't know how many people are listening to this, and I think a lot of times like people do this to get to the masses. The reality is, look, if it's something that interests people, great. If there's topics we could be taking on that you'd be more interested in, let us know. We know the market right now is friends and family. We're good with that. But we do get into a lot of different things, but the conversations are they're pretty organic. I mean, they're not scripted. We don't really know what we're even going to talk about or where we're going to go. Like we have ideas. Like I want to tackle. We talked
Oh,
about this
that's
too.
how
I
it's
want to
supposed to
tackle.
be, right?
Well, yes, I know,
That's
but
the
that's
whole,
not
whole
this
premise.
business. I wanted to tackle at some point, particularly with some of the comments I made in studio at ESPN about Alabama and the Brandon Miller situation, like morality in sports, because I
Made you
think it's
some
a
friends
serious
down in
issue.
Alabama.
Yeah, no, but it's not even about Alabama. It's everywhere. And if you think this is just an Alabama issue, you're out of your mind. Um, whatever rules we change, people are still going to cheat. You know, people are always going to cut corners, do anything to win. That's the reality of it. But I do think we're at a point where we need to take a serious look at standards in sports. You know, for the sake of sustainability, with all these changes, man, we don't realize that the interest in the game is waning. It's dwindling. Less kids are involved in basketball today than they were when we grew up. And truth be
Well,
told, when
that's a
there's less kids
definite.
involved, but think about it, if there's less kids involved in it now, how many kids are going to be interested in watching it 20 years from now? It's going to be a lot less. And I think that ties into our rules conversation that we had. You know, the fact that we like rules that actually make the game fun. I think there's so many more benefits to the rules changes that we talked about. You know, we talked about shot clock, flow, rhythm, you know, no live ball timeouts. And it also made me think like, would coaches get on the officials as much as they do if there was more rhythm and flow in the game? Go ahead and answer that as a coach. Would you
Oh,
be as
then
consumed by every call if there was rhythm and flow in the game?
I would argue that even though I'm pretty intense and I have my not so good games and better games, I don't have as much time to argue because I do have rhythm
Exactly.
and flow. I mean,
Exactly.
we're fourth or fifth in the country in scoring, and we're I think top five in pace. So you can't. It's forgotten. It's gone. Right. There's more
Right?
opportunity.
It's
It's the
now what?
same.
It's now what? It's now what? Constantly. Now what?
Got to keep going. It's
Yep.
the interconnectedness of the game is interesting, and I think when you go back to there's a lot that you kind of set me up for, so I can go a lot of different directions. But
Didn't even know we were going there.
when you think about, I was actually talking to somebody about tempo and flow right now and what's needed in the game, and I just talk about some of my constraints and my non-negotiables. The basic is just never be boring. So even when I
Yes.
make a game plan for the NCAA tournament, it's like, hey, I don't know. I'm just not going to be boring. I mean, we're not doing that. Even if it's the championship, we're not doing that. Our identity is we're not being boring. Um, but I think to go back to your original opener on the morality, I think there's a lot to unpack there. Not because of college sports, but I think
Yes. Yeah. This
there's a
is
couple things involved with that whole aspect of things in sports. I mean, naturally, it's not in a vacuum of sports, right? It's not just like, oh, it's the sports thing.
societal.
Yeah, well, in a couple ways. One is it's communal, right? When you think about
Yeah.
college sports and you read about I don't know, football cheating scandals in the Ivy League or something in the 20s. I don't know all the details, but I'm sure it was there, right? Or whether it was academics or whether it was, I don't know, stealing the mascot or whatever. It was for communal pride, right? Which which is its own force of good, but it's also its own force of not good, right? Because Penn State, right? When things hit the fan 10 years ago or so, people were talking about how it wasn't good, right? It's the same thing with whether it's cheating in football or men's basketball or overlooking things that aren't good for the community itself. When your communal pride is all based on winning, and being successful on a court or on a field, you're willing to make compromises, right?
Yep.
That alone, think about it. That alone was enough to get people to cheat. Now you add in millions and billions of dollars. What do you think's going to happen? Compromise everywhere, right? And when you add in these coaches making millions of dollars, how many things are you willing to overlook if that's where your hope is, right? That your life is bound up into it. So that doesn't mean that you change the system and make everyone poor, because that doesn't solve anything either. You'll be right back to communal pride. But it is to say that I think
we might get there either way. We might end up back there either way.
Yep. Anything can fall at any time. But I wonder how many institutions, I think that's why I like sometimes D3 is so refreshing, because, I joke about it with people when I lose on a Wednesday night. Who really cares?
Yeah.
The answer is, besides me, nobody is really losing that much sleep.
And your bosses.
Oh yeah, you're doing great. You're exceeding expectations, and like that is a refreshing thing. Now, I lived in the professional sports world, so I kind of don't always like that. I like having some pressure. I like having some things on my shoulders. I feel like it focuses me and it keeps me hungry and all this other stuff. So you have to find your own motivations. But that is the original intent. The original intent, and it's not that we don't take pride in things, right? Rowan has 8 NJAC championships so far this year. Like, we take pride in doing well, but I don't think it's a pride that's out of control, right? That's leading to just radical compromise. We're still interested in doing what's best for kids and doing what's best for the community.
Why is that? Because my argument is, it gets to a point where the value, it's like the NBA, right? Why is the NBA so different today than it was 20, 30 years ago? Well, the pride was greater than value 20, 30 years ago. And it's gotten to the point where value is greater than pride at this point. The guys would rather sit out to extend a career because of the money tied to it than play and represent what the heck they want to represent. Win games.
Well, even just represent a community for a long period of time. Right. So that's why I like, I don't like, think about Dame Lillard or something like that. He doesn't seem to be wanting to go anywhere. He seems to want to plant himself and stay. I respect that. Right. Curry, Thompson, like Green, like there's no rush to just go to the next place. And, free agency, there's a trickle down effect in free agency. I mean, you have a bunch of first and second graders who are free agents on the AAU market that shouldn't exist. Well, where did that start? It started at the top. Well, we should have free agency in the NBA or whatever, but it's led to some things that we don't necessarily like. Well, I would argue that it's not just communal pride, because different communities are built around different
identities,
centers
really,
of
too.
Yeah, different centers of emphasis, different identities, right? So whether it's football or whether it's, again, just to bring up Penn State, right, who I'm rooting for, and I think they're doing well, and I hope they get off that bubble and into the NCAA tournament. But if Penn State football is a bad season, that has a bigger impact on the community than Penn State basketball not having a good season, right? We always knew that. That's because of the priority and place that football has in that community and in that whole state and region and history and everything else. So some things mean more to others. And that doesn't have to do with just money. It's not because of money. It's because of it's so ingrained in the Penn State community culture. Football is central, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So I think that's true for different communities. And, listen, let's face it, there are some communities, there's plenty of college communities that have just valued winning no matter what. They don't care how it gets done. They don't care what it costs, right? And
they'll almost condemn you if you're not doing what others are willing to do to win.
Yeah, and without naming names, right? You hear stories of, places where coaches might have been considering a job and then kind of heard how it actually works and shied away from those jobs, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where it's inevitable, right? It doesn't matter, right? Because it's like when you go to Europe, you're going to see the same thing. You go to China, you're going to see the same thing. You go to Australia, you're going to see the same thing. Like you want to be successful. So I just think a good conversation to have, though, is this balance between money, because everyone just blames the money right away. And it's like, well, yeah, I get that. Like, there is so much money involved. There is just a adoration and worship of money, and not just a worship of it, just an attachment to it, right? Not because, think about college sports. It's not like these athletic programs were attached to it from the beginning. They didn't have any, right? They were just like me, right? They were worse than me, these D1 programs, right? They didn't have anything. They were working in the back offices somewhere, and just the cinder block office like I got, and, make and do $6,000. What wouldn't wake at UCLA when he went out to UCLA, like $6,500 or something?
Yeah, well, I remember Roy Williams telling me his first job was for like $5,000 a year.
Yeah. So there wasn't any money in it. You didn't get into it for the money. Now it's different. And when you can get into something for the sake of the money, you're going to get a lot of people who aren't good, right? Who aren't good for the thing itself, because they wouldn't get into the thing.
Define good.
I mean, good for the community, and even good at what they do, right? But even good at what they do.
Yeah, perpetually good too. Like, not just successful 1 year on paper, but like perpetually good to the point where when that coach leaves 10, 15 years down the road, the program's in a better place because they were there.
Yes. And someone who's willing to risk some things in order to make that happen. But
risk is hard when money is there.
Yeah. And I don't mean risk in terms of like risking a recruit or risking or whatever. I mean, risk meaning like dismissing somebody from your team, or risk meaning like, this is how we play. And, I tell people,
risk having a standard these days. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is the risk of having standards that you hold players accountable to, especially I always said, with name, image, and likeness in the transfer portal, we're going to screw it all up. There's no way we can get both at the same time and not screw it up. Not to mention you add the extra COVID year. The extra COVID year is a whole other wrinkle. But NIL and the transfer portal together, with the lack of standards that we've already had, all the business under the table type of thing. Now you put it on top of the table. You think we're going to get this right? No. Whatever the new line you draw, we're going to blur it. We're going to step over it. Like that's it's almost like humanity perpetuated in sport.
I would say not everyone.
No, not everyone.
But it takes a certain strength of community and history and clarity of what you stand for to not get caught up in that. And a lot of times, let's face it, some of it is just maybe you're not a part of that in group, right? The Power Five, for example. But part of your identity needs to be being distinct, being different, being, operating with integrity. That has to be core to who you are, not to who you say you are. Everyone says they are, but who you actually are, right? Backing it up with action, backing it up with maybe even
what
longevity.
Is Penn State's? Don't they say success with honor?
Yeah, and you got to back it up.
I would love to say, like, okay, define that and show me an example of it. Like, what exactly? Like, I know we say these things, but what do they really mean? And how do you apply that when it comes to holding people accountable? Living up to a standard, ensuring that teams all live up to that standard.
Well, I think the academic component is big, but I think more so is the social and communal component, and I think that's where this is an interesting way of looking at it, but I think one of the biggest problems is nobody wants to hold anybody to any standard anywhere.
Yes.
And then you're like, well, oh, whose standard, and why do I have to meet that standard? That is in our culture right now, especially in our
Yes.
teenage culture, so that these kids come in and are like, well, I don't want to adhere to any standard. And
What was LinkedIn? I saw LinkedIn had an ad that says "Make your own standard," and I was like,
how's that work for your team?
How's that really working for your team? How's it working for your employer? Like, make your own standard. That's like saying, well, we all wear suits, but I would make my own standard. I'm going to wear a jumpsuit. I don't know.
Or it's worse, right? Because your standards don't have to be overly rigid. I don't have overly rigid standards, right? I don't have, you have to tuck your shirt in and like, I have to be exactly on time because I got half the kids coming from class and whatever else. I can't have rigid standards. You're driving your car and you pick up your.
I'm talking about your foundational standards, not your.
No, what I'm saying is like standards of like basic behavior, standards of putting others first, standards of play for your team. Those kind of things are even written or unwritten. They're essential standards. And what brought this up, right? What brought this up was what you said about the Alabama situation, which was what? Fill me in.
Well, the Alabama situation.
How'd you say it on ESPN?
Ultimately, the way I took it is I wasn't going to take a stance against the kid. We don't really know. We all act like we know exactly what happened, but the reality is if I'm a coach, there are 3 players involved in an incident that took the life of a community member, and the argument was made that the one who brought the gun to the friend or the teammate really didn't have anything to do with it. Bullet holes in the car. And again, I don't want to get into the specifics because people were very adamant about the fact that his attorney made a statement. And I tried to tell people, look, attorneys don't make statements, they make arguments. He's making an argument publicly. He's making a statement, and his statement is an argument. So we'll take that for what it is.
Essentially,
he's prepping for a case. And but my issue was if you represent a community, you're Alabama basketball, you represented a community, and 3 players were involved in something that took the life of a community member. I'm sorry, but those 3 players can't play on my team until things are all figured out. Now, I get the sense that Brandon Miller is the best player in the country. I know that. I think he's the #1 draft pick overall, and he's a phenomenal basketball player. I mean, he's the best pro in college basketball right now. But in the mid-January, if you say, hey, we got to sit him down for this, he's gone. There's no way he's staying at Alabama. He's going to go get ready for the NBA draft. So there's a part of you that says, that just seems too easy for you to say, hey, it's okay. He didn't really do anything wrong. I have a tough time living with that because to me, there are a lot of excuses for behavior that shouldn't even be within the realm of possibilities. 2 a.m, bringing a gun to a teammate shouldn't even be within the realm of possibilities. And maybe it's something that coach didn't do a good job of establishing early. And if not, then that's on coach. But to listen to some of the downplaying of the situation, only then to see the pat down, there's a blatant disregard for someone else's reality, and that's what bothers me. And I feel like it's justifiable for the sake of money, for the sake of wins and losses, as we talk about, or the avoidance of losses. So to me, it was clear that there is a standard that is not really being lived up to there, or a standard that they don't really care about. And that bothers me because I don't think that's sustainable in sports. I think the more we let things go like this, the more we let NIL dominate the game right now, the more people are going to cheat, the harder it's going to be to get it under control. And there's going to get a point where we realize that basketball, college basketball, doesn't have the value to carry everything else. And if football were to separate, what is college basketball? Like I said before, of $1 billion TV deal for the Big Ten, $1 billion annually, $900 million of that's football. Not as many people care about basketball as you think. In a way, college basketball at times on ESPN feels like a placeholder. How many people are really watching?
Well, but that goes back to one of our other discussions that talked about oversaturation of the market. I tend to think the market will correct itself eventually with some of this stuff and bring a lot of administrators back to reality. I think people need to plan on that, actually.
You think they are?
Well, no, they're not.
No.
I think they're in a spending spree, just like any other market would be.
Well,
Um,
we're in a getting and spending spree. That's where we're at. I mean, to the point where you bring UCLA and USC into the Big Ten. I mean,
well, and then there's
you're
reports of
telling me
more.
that's I know
I,
there's
I said
there's
you might as
definitely
well
gonna be more.
just call it half of the NCAA, half of the new NCAA. But
Yeah.
so go back to your original point, right? So one is I really don't know enough of the details of the case.
I don't know if anybody really does.
It doesn't look good. It's not good. I think the one is like anybody who is an Alabama fan. It has to be, and anybody, right? Chiefs, SEC, Big Ten, any community. If you were to say, "Hey, are you guys a little too attached to winning?" And they said no, you would say you're delusional. You're really
Yes.
not self-aware at all, right? Like you guys are definitely too attached to winning. There's plenty of stories out there about the SEC in general, right? So
Yeah.
I think that is one that's like, let's take a step back and recognize this is a struggle, right? It's like talking to somebody who is insistent that they haven't done anything wrong, and you're like, oh, maybe is there a possibility that you maybe value winning too much? Maybe can you admit it? Yeah, maybe. Right. Let's start there. That should be pretty easy for anyone at a Power 5 school anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But the second component of this that I wonder, like we have a code of conduct, student code of conduct, and there's certain things that are really easy, but that has been a talking point, particularly with things like marijuana when it was illegal. Now, when it's
Yeah.
legal, it's a total disaster and a mess because kids are getting mixed messages. They're like, well, this is legal. Okay. Yeah, but it's also potent and not good for you. And you also can get tested in the NCAA.
I was going to say, you got the NCAA tournament coming
so it's
up.
like,
And
these kids are like, what are you talking about? I grew up in Colorado. It's really weird. But anyway, there's some clear cut stuff. And then there's some stuff that I don't know that I've been directly a part of, but have had conversations about situations where you're going, can I, if there has not been a charge and there has not been a situation, what are the ramifications if I unrightfully suspend you? Right? This has been true for some sexual assault cases and whatever else. What could be coming your way legally if what could be coming their way legally if they wrongfully suspend?
okay, well, Chris Beard is a great example right now because
So
charges are
keep it to the players. The players have a code of conduct, right? And the code of conduct is probably pretty uniform, differentiating from the outs that a contract gives, right? So it is a contract, it is. But when it comes to some legal matters, I do think an interesting conversation, right, at any level, right, especially with sexual assault allegations for men's players, if it becomes unfounded and they lose a season or lose half a season, what are the ramifications for that? What happens if that individual comes back and sues the school and sues the athletic department for a loss of a whatever?
professional career earnings.
Yeah, or hey, you're hindering my professional career. I do think that is now, and this is why you can't talk about this on ESPN because you don't have time at halftime, right?
Yeah.
But I do wonder, and I don't know the answer to this. I don't know. Sometimes the answer might be unilaterally, I can do this. But I think that's getting harder and harder in today's world. I think it used to be that simple. I don't like it. It didn't help our team. You're suspended 6 games because I said so.
Yeah.
Good luck with that nowadays, right? And that is, I believe, part of the administrative. That is not to defend anyone. That's not even to say that I disagree with you. But if this kid's set to make millions of dollars and this hinders his making millions of dollars, and you find out later that he wasn't in the wrong or whatever the thing is, I have no idea. Are you setting yourself up for more trouble than what you're dealing with now?
I just think that's a slippery slope, though. That is such a
course,
slippery slope
is.
where we sit here and say, well, I can't really do anything because he hasn't been charged yet. It's a stain on our program and it's a stain on college basketball. I mean, let's just play the scenario out to the point where this story is not going away. And Alabama is one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah,
And
it's not
maybe they
good.
go to a Final Four and win a national championship. Is there not a stain on that national championship? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's not good. Nobody's saying it's good. That's for sure. I just think, I think that's just one thing in the equation that I bring up, that I bring it up because it's a legitimate conversation behind the scenes that a lot of people aren't having above the scenes, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, they don't want to get that. We talk about nuanced conversation. There is a little
yeah.
nuance
That's
to that
a
of
lot of
like,
nuance.
there's some rights, there's some whatever. If you wrongfully suspend somebody, you have your own trouble. Again, I don't know the answer to that because the code of conduct might make it pretty easy that the answer is, yeah, you should be suspended.
Yeah.
I would be fine with that, right? I would support that if that's the case.
Yeah, but how
But
many times have we seen, guys get in fights in practice and get suspended? I got kicked out of a practice and got suspended for the first half of a game.
when
That was my sophomore year. I mean, I probably deserved it, but
I don't remember that. What game was that?
it was early in the season. Sharif Chambliss and I got into it in practice because he was being a hero on the scout team. He knew what play we were
You got to
running.
send this to Sharif. He'll
He
totally
did.
admit to that.
I'm gonna let Sharif know. Reef and I got kicked out of practice. I think we talked about it. I saw him at Wisconsin. He's assistant at Wisconsin, and we talked about this. And we were great friends. But he knew the play we were running, and coach just kept making us run it. I was like, coach, and this was before the time of adjustments or counters, right? Like it was like either the play worked or it didn't work. That's how lame we were back in the day.
I
Like,
was the adjustment.
we're running
counter. That's the way I
salute 2.
thought.
Salute 2 is America's play, and I'm going to screen the screener action. I'm going to come off that screen. It's like, well, I can't get the shot. He knows what we're running. And eventually, I think I got mad, threw a ball at him. Coach kicked us out of practice. I think I got suspended for other reasons, probably the conversation I had with an administrator following that incident. But
Well, I would say this though, like there might be a team rule though in place for that. Again, I'm not defending it.
yeah,
I
but
think
that's
it
common
probably
sense,
is.
team. I'm making the point that I know what I did. Everybody knows what I did. You did something wrong. This is what's going to happen. Okay. Am I suing anybody? What happened in our world that
No, I
anytime
agree.
something's happened?
Well, because you have
Like we
rights and you
should
don't
have.
want to have standards. I mean,
Yes, that's my problem.
it's the same thing we talk about, like when we talk about standards or all this stuff that's going on, and you're like, try running a team like you want to run that classroom or run that whatever. Like it says you're going to lose. That's what's going to happen. You're going to lose.
Yes.
It doesn't work. Kind of everybody's equal and your opinions are all equal. That's not how winning works.
Nope.
But I would say, I mean, I say that just to kind of throw an other side of it, but I do think they're going to find themselves in some difficult waters because it seems like the facts are out. Clearly, this guy's an amazing player, and it's a stain. Yeah, it's a stain. And I think the one thing I'll say is like, you can't control. People think, well, you can control at the higher level. You can control who you bring in, right? I can't always control who I bring in because I'm the gatekeeper, but these kids are paying for school. Right. This isn't the same. Like, hey, coach, I'm transferring. Can I try out for the team? That's different. But at that level, you can control who you bring onto your team. And you do need to do due diligence. And it's not just that individual, right? Because if you bring in the wrong individual, he could start dragging people down, which might seem to be the case here. So I think, but you get so worried about winning and you get so focused on talent, which of course every coach wants talent. I want talent, that you have to be careful you don't end up with something like this. And the moment it happens, and I think the one thing I personally love watching that team play. They play good basketball.
Agreed.
So I think that Nate Oats is a good coach, but I think the response itself was clearly not good.
Let me ask you this, point blank. This is your team. You brought 3 players in on full scholarship.
It was 3, it wasn't 2?
It was, well, including Brandon Miller.
So who were the other 2?
Two, Miles and I don't
So
forget the other
one's
name.
gone
You're
or
asking me on
both
the
gone?
spot. Both are gone except Brandon Miller. And Brandon
And
Miller's
they
the one
were
they're arguing. He didn't know that the gun was there, or he didn't touch it, and he didn't know what he was going to do. It doesn't. Either way, the argument doesn't sound good.
it might be true,
There's
but it still doesn't it's still not
either
great.
way,
It's still
exactly,
not good.
exactly. And
Yeah.
once again, you're a member of the community's gone. Players you brought in led to
True, that
this, and
community.
yes. And my point is, what do you do in that moment? What are you as a coach going to do? Because look, I mean, regardless if someone wants to come back and sue you or not, at what point do you sit down with your administration and say, do you know what this is going to do to the program going forward? Do you know what this would mean if we keep winning and all of this comes out? It's going to be a narrative we can't control. I mean, and the strangest thing is,
Well,
people within the Alabama community have been very supportive of Brandon Miller. Kind of, which is I get they're fans, but again, member of the community's gone. I think it's a really tough one for me to wrap my head around. Where I just don't understand. If I'm a coach, I would have to go to my administration and say, I can't do this. This is on me. And at some point, I'm the coach. Whatever the players want to say, their behavior is going to be a reflection on me and of me.
When were the details known?
They said they knew right away that he was involved to a degree, but he didn't really do anything wrong. He wasn't involved in the shooting. Well, look, he brought the gun to the scene. His car had bullet holes in it. People are arguing that he was blocking the exit, so he was somehow involved. Others are saying he didn't know anything.
That's where
Again,
you
the
say
attorneys.
allegedly, right?
Well, there's a lot of allegedly, but again, you're involved, and he played the next day, 2 days later, after this happened. Which, first off, I can't get that around my head. This happened to teammates, and it's amazing how the team as a whole performed the way they did after something like this happened. I mean, this is like, it's groundbreaking to me. I'm just like, it's absolutely beyond what I consider to be of a norm within our world. But it sadly seems like it's almost becoming more of a norm. So look, we could talk about this for days.
Yeah, I think let's go back to the details. Is we're getting lost in the weeds, but I think in general, to not take a step back and at least a minor suspension or a something is really difficult to imagine.
Yes.
Again, I think there's that other side of the coin that I don't think. And the reason I bring it up is because it's not because I disagree with you. I agree with you. But the reason I bring it up is I do think it's something that people on the outside don't consider with a lot of these things.
Well, you bring it up because we do appreciate the nuance, and in the world of nuance, there are no absolutes in that sense. So I do think it's
there might be some absolutes, but this one is part of the equation when it comes to the answers that we just kind of blatantly throw out there.
Yeah.
And I think just go back, right? Why are we here? Why am I here?
Yeah.
Why am I rowing?
Yeah.
Why am I coaching? What is this all about? And we use 4 words of unite, inspire, represent, and expand. Right? Those are the 4 words I come back to. And now that I said this, I'm going to remind my team of that. To unite the community. It's a diverse community. Very few things are able to unite the community. The theater club can't do it the same way sports can. And, the engineering club is specific to engineering, right? It's going to reach the community in a variety of ways, but not sports in our culture can unite a variety of people, represent a variety of people, inspire, because sports inspires if it's done well, right?
Yeah.
That's why I don't play 60 to 55. I want to inspire people, never be boring. And then expand the reach, expand the reach into the community, expand maybe the reach on television, nationally, internationally, expand the reach for students and research dollars and all this other stuff. That's what sports are there for. Well, right, what's happened in a lot of situations is it just becomes down to winning, and that's it. And that's how you fulfill that mission. It's a mistake. It's a mistake because and it always works this way. When you make that mistake, it's not going to last. If you want to build something that lasts, you have to do it in a way that faithfully represents what you actually value and what you say you actually to what you say you value. And I think a lot of communities give lip service to, oh, this is what we value. And then when the dollars come in and the pressure mounts, they don't care. And they listen to people on Twitter who aren't as invested as people think. And, you know, they're not that interested in it. So I think just there's a lot of situations where we get into something for all the right reasons. Money starts to come in and we lose sight of it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably what's happened to a lot of college athletics, professional athletics, businesses, like anything else. When the wealth comes, that's when the true test is.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're seeing now. Yeah. And I think that's what you're seeing now. Yep. There's its
it's interesting
difficulties with wealth. You know, it's just winning. It's like what I say to the players all the time. Winning leads to losing. When you win, it's hard to just stay focused on the process and everything else. Just get better, enjoy what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. And then nope, all this dumb stuff creeps in and we get lazy and character stuff comes to the surface and then you lose. Then all of a sudden winning wasn't enough for you. You needed to make it interesting, right?
Yeah.
That's true with this too. So I think long-term, it's not going to be good.
That's what's interesting about. So I have this conversation with myself all the time. I always joke that I have multiple personalities. They're all functioning at the same time. And I do talk to myself about a lot of these things. And one of them is, in this business, what's enough? Like, I really enjoy what I do, but there's going to be a certain point, if you really do keep moving up, I'm going to enjoy it less and less and less and less. I know it. I've seen it. You know, it's played out everywhere. Somewhere out there, years ago, there was a point where this game started to shift, where coaches that worked their way up doing it because they loved it now had to keep what they got. And I feel like there was a shift where it really became more about the money, keeping what I have, keeping the job, the money, the power, all the things that come with it. And I think there was a shift in the game. The same way in my business. If someone came to me tomorrow and said, I want to pay you $1 million to do what you do, it would change me. There's no way around it. We're human. It would change me. So I wonder if we've gotten to a point where the value tied to it is so great that you will sacrifice everything else because the value perceivably solves all your other problems, which it doesn't. It really doesn't. I think I'm often reminded, because I tried to tell somebody this on radio. I was actually on ESPN radio, and I said, what people don't get is there's a reason why I love this so much, because I do have a foundation in this sport, and the foundation came from my grandfather, our grandfather, our father's dad, Pop. He was the only one in his family to play sports. I mean, these guys, they were dirt poor. Like I said, I tell the story all the time. Moved every year because taxes were due. You know, had to go to the military after losing his mom when he was 5, his dad when he was 16, had to go to the military academy to play basketball. Eventually was able to earn a scholarship to go to Temple. He never left Camden County Community College. And I never knew he really had opportunities beyond that. And I remember at his retirement dinner talking to people who were like, oh, you know, Cliff always passed up on all these great jobs. I was like, really? Like in Philly too, where he spent most of his time and collegiately and professionally, even lived there. And he said, well, I always had what I never had growing up. I was like, what's that? He goes, a house. Like, what a great place to be. Because this is a guy who died at 77, much too young, suffered quite a bit in his life, even later in his years, really struggled health-wise, but had the greatest life. And his retirement dinner was example of that. It was all the people that came and lived at his house while he was coaching, all the people that he went and picked up in Philadelphia just to make sure they got into school and took their classes so they could play basketball. I mean, he had a great life because of this game, but also partially because he never had too much. He was never really tempted by that. And I wonder if there's a point where we just can't handle it. And it's no longer sport. It's entertainment, right? I feel like that's almost what we've gotten to. It's a world of entertainers. So one of the interesting things, and maybe this will be my way to spin out of this, is
I don't think we should.
That's not an issue. But it's
say something.
But I want to say, like, you can say something about that. But I think it's interesting because the situation you're in is I don't want to say the exact opposite. You still have social dynamics that are similar to what we see at the Power Five and anywhere else, even professionally. There's still the same social dynamics and social challenges within a group. The human dynamics within a group, they're always going to be present, but you don't have the money issue. Like, do you see it being completely different at your level in that sense?
Yeah, but remember, it's not just the money; it's the attachment to it. One of the things you said, one of the first things that popped into my head when you said like there's this rise in just protecting what you have, right? It's because you get up 20 and then you it's very difficult when you're up 20 to do all the things you did to get up 20.
Yeah,
It's almost impossible. Like it's so difficult.
that's
I
why
try to set this.
you play your practices. What, down 15-4 to play, or what do you?
Yeah,
What
well, I
do you
say
do?
down 12-8 to left, but I still think I might do that this week. Actually, I forgot about that game. Down 12-8 left, but I think there's a sense of urgency and focus. And you know what a lot of teams do is, and the teams who like Virginia, right? They always look the same. Well, why do they always look the same? It's a close game. You take a close game. My kids are all playing hard. They're all competing. They're whatever.
Yeah.
They get up 20. They're like, hey, watch this cool move I can do. And people would be like, well, I wouldn't do that. Oh, would you? You would. You're going to be the exception to winning leads to losing. No, you're not. I try to set the standard at 30 to say don't get loose till 30, but because we play so fast, somebody could come up. But the other thing I thought when you said that was, you know what else dwindled? More money came in, points per game.
Yes,
that's what dwindled, right? We
but
can
that,
talk
but
about
that,
TV
that was
timeouts and
but
everything
that
else.
was the point I talked about with
it's less
coaches.
risk, right?
Yes.
It's more you want to take less risk. Why? Because you're up 20. That's why you got the job. You finally got the job that you've been working on. And I think that's part of the thing I don't like. That I don't like of a lot of basketball I see at the college level is it's uninspiring. And in the old days, you had teams averaging 90 to 100 and whatever. Now you have no one. Now you have no one averaging over 90 points a game in Division I basketball. That's what? What is going on here? Because there's no ability to switch things up. There's no ability to take risks because somebody's going to be calling for your head and they're going to succumb to that, right? But I think when you look at that doesn't mean you can't play well up 20. But it does mean you got to be pretty darn clear about what you want. And I also think, in talking to a lot of guys, that the busyness and the running around is a badge of honor more than it is an essential. It's a badge of honor that you have to show that you're worth what they're paying you, how hard I'm working and how much I'm sacrificing. Whereas I think, payment is more about the value placed on what you do in the community, not just the sheer amount. Right. And of course the value is on winning and being competitive, but it's also on just the way you run things. And I think the communities that get that right will be best over the long haul. Right. And I think,
but part of that is you, and part of that at the highest levels is also administration buying into it as well. I always said that with, you can go back to Indiana, when you come out and you say, we're going to hang banners again with this hire. It's like, well, there's your failure, because then you'll never see the value in building it, sustaining it, building something that is sustainable. You'll never see the value if you're outcome oriented. And it just seems as if we're so outcome oriented that the outcome dominates the narrative.
Well, or we should be outcome oriented, but it's what is the outcome? Of course.
Well, yes.
I mean, winning, if winning is the only outcome, that's different than, hey, we want to win like this. We want to win and be exciting and represent you well and unite you and serve you and in whatever capacity.
Well, how you win is tied to why you win too.
Yeah, and also literally how you represent. Like, do these individuals represent your community? Do they represent you well? And just not just on the court, though that's part of it, but off the court. And that's kind of what we're talking about. And that everyone says that's a priority, but let's be real. In a lot of places, it's not. And I'm one who, if it's not, then I'm not into you. That's the way it is. I don't care. I mean, I of course everyone would love to make some more money, but
at what cost?
I could have figured out some easier ways to make more money.
That's what I always think. More years.
Oh, definitely would
deal
have
with
played
that
a couple more years.
deal,
That's for
deal with that
sure.
sports hernia and get yourself back there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, definitely would have done that.
yeah, this is it's a hard conversation to have, but I think this is a conversation that conferences should be having. I think it's a conversation that athletic departments should be having. What do we really want to stand for? What do we really want to represent with our sports teams?
Well,
And
and think about it. The reason they need to have these conversations isn't just for PR. It's because
yes,
the way you run a great business is by having a great business, is by having a integral community based, we care about people business. Those are the businesses that succeed, and the
yeah,
other ones, you can get big and you can lose sight of all these things. They historically will fall off a cliff at some point,
yeah. Rome.
um, when you lose sight of that. So I think that's a
I said Rome.
conversation.
Said Rome. I
Yeah,
might as well say America.
it's
Let's be real.
possible.
Let's
It's
be real.
possible.
We're not. But it's a tough one. I feel like anytime the higher ups, the C suite, that is the athletic department and presidents, when they get together, is it to make things great or is it to put out a fire? And I feel like more often than not, it's we get together to put out fires, and that's a concern. That's not growing things perpetually. That's what bothers me. But also, you see the programs that are doing well. They're places where coaches have longevity. There's consistency. And I feel like the inconsistency in the sport makes it tough too. We're
Oh yeah, it
in a
makes it like the
way,
NBA. That's
yes,
what it is.
yep. It's like I
That's
need to win
that's
here so I can make sure I get another job, and that's kind of the culture of sports in general. I mean, it's kids in AAU teams, it's coaches, it's everywhere because of the value tied to it. So, man, we went on for like 45 minutes about this, and we had no idea
Yep.
where we were going to go.
Yep. We
We
didn't
didn't
get
even
to the
talk
other
about
stuff.
you in the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
Maybe
Hopefully
we'll
we
have to
can
do
talk
it.
about it next week. That's what I hope.
Well, yeah. Oh shoot.
That would be
If we
nice.
don't talk about Joe in the NCAA tournament next week, just know that it didn't go as well as planned.
Well, or we
So
won't talk next week because I'll be
we're
bummed.
just
But
maybe
we
we should
shall
do a
see.
quick one tomorrow. Maybe we should do a quick one tomorrow morning, setting up your tournament. Maybe we'll do a quick 15-minute video that'll turn into 50 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if we got time for that.
This was good. This was good. I think it's good to have the conversation. I think it's good for people to know. Look, we don't know everything, so I think we can't speak in absolutes to say how dare this kid be playing. That's not what we're saying. We just think that there are things that we should be taking seriously with sports, so sports can be sustainable, particularly in a world like the one we're dealing with. We're divided, man. There's a lot of critics out there, and the critics seem to see things in an absolute way, yet this is a world of nuance. So having the conversation is important. The conversation is not absolute, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. So I hope you appreciate it. If there's things you want us to talk about, we're supposed to say like and subscribe, but
Yep.
really this isn't like a fundraiser, guys. We're just doing this because we do it anyway, and we hope that people learn how to have conversations, not just yell and scream at each other like the people I get on Twitter. Just because I say something doesn't even mean that I know I'm right. I just don't think I'm wrong. Again, doesn't mean I'm right. So we have the conversations. And we hope we all can grow from them. So till next time, we hope Joe has a nice run in the NCAA tournament, hosting the first two rounds. Who you got first up? Cal Lutheran.
Got
That's
Lutheran.
right. Russell White. I knew him on the West Coast. He was the head coach at Crespi High School. Had some good players. London Parantes was one of them at Virginia. So hope it goes well, and we'll do a follow up one way or another. If either it's next week or the following week. I got a busy schedule, man. I got some conference tournaments here coming up. Got 3 conference tournaments, actually 4. I've got the Ohio Valley on Saturday, Missouri Valley on Sunday, Patriot on Wednesday, American on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then the first
It's a good
4
schedule.
on Tuesday and Wednesday of NCAA tournament week. Then I got the week off, which is awesome to just watch games. I'm going to watch games Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then Tuesday, I'm back up in New York. I think I told you this. I'm up in New York for the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. So that'll be fun.
Yeah,
That'll be a
that's a
lot
good
of fun.
schedule.
So looking forward to it. Plenty to catch up on as we get through the rest of this season. So we'll talk soon. Thanks, folks.